This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Well, welcome again to another exciting series of episodes that we are covering for environment and sustainability. I think we've covered really interesting set of episodes with individuals from the sustainability space in the last 1 year or so. In continuation to that, we've got another exciting guest joining us, who is a sustainability analyst. He's going to introduce to you in a while. And what we are going to talk about today is what are the different opportunities for organizations in the sustainability space, right? Those can be organizations which are directly creating an impact on the society by having solutions which are creating an impact on sustainability directly, or they are doing certain steps which makes them more sustainable than other companies, or the individuals in those organizations are taking some steps to lead sustainability. So we're going to discuss all of that today. But let's introduce our guest first. So Simon, do you want to introduce yourself to us and to our audience on what you do in your role as a sustainability analyst?
Yes, hello. My name's Simon. I'm a sustainability analyst, and the key role of that job is to basically interpret all the different indicators that you can use as to what is sustainability, how to measure if your company is doing the right thing, turning those indicators into report and sort of meaningful information. That's generally what a sustainability analyst does. And yep, I've been in the space for the last year working in carbon accounting, and prior to that, I had 5 or 6 years in the waste industry, which was my training, if you could say, towards becoming a sustainability analyst without actually knowing it. But yeah, a lot of data in the waste industry, understanding where that's going, how much is getting recycled, who it's going to. All that type of stuff is starting to become more important and more requested from companies and organizations. So yeah, there's definitely it's an expanding space, and happy to be here.
That's amazing, Simon. And I think those are really critical areas to think about. We always talk about how can we recycle stuff or how can we reuse stuff. A lot of people actually don't know about how to do those things. Just giving you a simple example, I think people still get confused between the different colored bins that are outside our offices. People don't even know where to throw different things. And then some people like George might say, well, why do I need to care about the color of the bin? I can just throw it anywhere and it will get recycled at the end of the day. So I wanted to understand from you, what are the different opportunities for organizations, specifically in sustainability space coming up, and also touching upon the point that I just raised.
Oh, about which waste to throw your bin in?
Yeah.
Look, that's an age-old question. Whether you throw your pizza box in the recycling bin or the red bin. Unfortunately, the councils and recycling industry, waste industry is fractured and fragmented all across Australia. So you can be sitting in Maroubra, where I am now, and recycling certain things in our FOGO bin, and just in a couple of suburbs across, it can be a different scenario. So that's part of the challenge. The second challenge, I think, is that we tend to just batch all the things together and then leave it for the waste companies to process, and they can only do so at a level of scale. For example, a bottle cap or a small piece of aluminium foil, it's very easy for that to get missed. So look, there's problems sort of across the board, and there is no right answer to that. Just to know that it's not necessarily the end of the world if you do put one thing in one and not the other, because the systems down the line is really where it's going to get recycled ultimately. So, look, that's covering that one off pretty quickly. But looking at opportunities in the space, I mean, everyone has their different take on this. Everyone has their own conversations and perspective, and you guys might have heard or seen things. And look, from my perspective, it's been in the last 4 or 5 years probably that companies are starting to put more investment, sort of not just the big companies, but more middle revenue companies are starting to put more money and focus into achieving sustainable targets and goals. And basically, it's just to summarize that, it's becoming more popular. And if we take the waste industry as an example, the sort of bingos and the cleanaways of the world who have been collecting waste for 50 years or however long, it's only in the last 4 or 5 that the builders have started to ask those companies, how much of my waste is getting recycled? Where's this going? I want a sustainability report. I want a report. So there are these type of emerging demands from consumers. And I think for the opportunities in sustainability is to really put emphasis on those small requests in your businesses or organizations, wherever you may be. So some email might come across your desk that says, can you please send me an ESG report or a diversity assessment, or any number of little questions. And you've got 100 things on your to-do list. You've got to get your regular job done, and then there's just sort of 1 or 2 requests about sustainability. But I suppose what I would say is prioritize those. Don't ignore those requests. And the reason being is they're only going to increase.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. I think one of the biggest criticism that a lot of sustainability analysts might face, and I'm sure you would agree with me on that, is when we prepare such reports, we are often not giving realistic measures on what can be implemented. We start setting up unrealistic timelines, and the government start creating unrealistic timelines after looking at those reports. That's something which is not possible at most of the occasions. George and I have had a lot of discussion on that previously in similar sort of episodes. So I want to bring in George as well to this discussion, and possibly interrogate you on that lens as well, and see where we can take that discussion.
Well, first off, Sarab, you made the slanderous comment at the beginning that I may not care about which bin. I'll have you know that I've been involved in recycling longer than you've been on this earth. So back in my 30s, I launched a product called Aquapore water weeping hose, and that was made from recycled tyres. And if you go out into the footpath, our playgrounds, and you see that rubbery sort of beady stuff that you put down in playgrounds, I was part of a team that created that product, again with Barfell rubber technology, Pacific Dunlop. And I haven't been a litterer since I was 21 or 22. And my then girlfriend said to me, "Why did you throw that on the ground?" And I said, "I threw it in the gutter." And she said, "If you threw it in the bin, it'd be a lot better." And I've never forgotten that day, and I've never littered since then. So I'm a much better person at this than you give me credit for, my friend. Now, when we come to the topic of councils, well, there's or government organisations. It amazes me, Simon, that we accept the guff that a lot of them put out about their timeline for sustainability. The only thing that they're experts at is to run a study or a survey or research, or let's have a report done. I'm 69 this year, and I think I've heard for about 15 years about waste to energy plants being looked at by councils. I'm still waiting, I'm still waiting for them to actually do something definite, but nobody wants it in their backyard. Oh no, don't want that sort of stuff. So, but Tarab raises a good point. How do we marry up realistic sustainability goals with the requirements of living and the requirements of business and even the requirements of government? We've all experienced the doyen of e-technology that's decided that we're going to have electric motor vehicles at the rate of 60 or 70% of the fleet within 30 years, but they don't have any power stations for them to be charged by, minus setback. So how do you, in your role, how do you try to marry those two up to say, hang on, fellas, we've got to get something realistic here?
Yeah, great point. So I fall back to my training master's sustainability. I was over in Sweden. So I did my master's there for a couple of years looking at what is sustainability, how we're going to achieve it. Within the first couple of months, by the true definition of sustainability, leaving the earth in as good or better condition for future generations, it seemed impossible, to be honest. To get that true purest form and definition of sustainability is probably not realistic. But it then also made me look at the word sustainability again, and what does that mean? Well, it's not actually the definition. It can be. I see it as a different thing. I see sustainability as a social construct of what people tend to feel and want it to be at the time. So sustainability has changed, and George, you probably got a bit more insight on this, but it used to be, I don't know, something else back in the day. They called it, corporate sustainability reporting, CSR or something, and then it's been something else, and then it was eco something, and now it's sustainability. But it is sort of our best guess as a collaborative as to what we can do in the future. So what is it? How can we achieve it? It's very hard to define. But yeah, I personally just take small steps in my daily life, in my daily approach. And I also acknowledge that not everyone has to do that. That's just what I feel a bit along like George is. I thought, well, why throw it out onto this gutter or into the wrong bin when I can try and do the right thing? Or I just tend to be proactive in that way. But back to your point, what are we trying to achieve? Well, something like net zero, is that really achievable? I mean, probably not. In my opinion, I don't think many companies, if any, would be able to reach net zero. So yes, I get the concept of having it as a goal. You set the bar high, but is it just too unrealistic? And should we say instead, let's not worry about how many carbon emissions we emit, but let's kind of focus on some granular stuff that we can look to implement. So very, very good question, very convoluted answer, but it's a challenge.
I think more than setting up goals, it's also about looking at how you can do that. So when you set up goals, if you can also define how you're going to achieve that goal by a certain year, how you're going to work on the alternatives, how you're going to support the existing infrastructure, how you're going to make sure that people don't lose their jobs because you are creating a new kind of an economy where people are not trained or people are not ready for that new kind of an economy which we are trying to build. That's what I feel.
Yeah, Yeah, talk about losing jobs. I mean, there'll be winners and losers out of this, and that's, business as usual. Tends to fall behind when an innovative, inspiring and good concept or product or brand comes along, and they may only have 5 or 10 employees to begin with, but they focus on whatever that thing is in a lot of detail, and they double down on it. For example, Tesla, that was their jam. They were competing against Ford and Holden and the massive companies of the world, but they had all of their resources and all of their engineers focusing on one thing, and then they out-competed business as usual and took over. So, I think there will be change and winners and losers, and just people could just be flexible around it. And I mean, of course, that's my opinion. Is always changing the business as usual concept, because business as usual has been great, but it's setting us on a trajectory where at the moment 75% of the Earth's land surface is used in one form or another by humans, whether for cities, for agriculture, or for managed forests, which only leaves us with, at the moment, 25% of the nature just to be as it is. So, and that's really kicked off in the last couple of 100 years. So if you kind of put a simple graph along, it's not going to be long before we really have very little nature. So that's the overall driver for sustainability. But it's a big concept. It's not something you want to think about every day. It's depressing. So you kind of put it aside and you just do things day to day. But I think that that concept of people, we kind of know that as a species we're starting to use more than we have. People are starting to wake up to that at a sort of a global or governmental level, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. This drive for sustainability, and now what is it, and how do we get there? That's what we got to figure out as we go.
I think the other problem we have is the greater majority of us don't know and don't understand the detail. So what does that leave us with? Well, it leaves us with getting the opinion of experts or supposed experts. And you get expert number one that says global warming, rubbish, doesn't exist, blah, 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 blah. And they roll out all of the detail as to why global warming is just a natural occurring thing, and don't worry about it, it's cyclical, and the Earth was a lot hotter than this 100 years ago, and all that sort of stuff. And you go, wow, okay, well then it's not an issue. And then expert B comes out and explains that the polar mass is deteriorating at the rate of 6.32 millimeters per second, and if you multiply that by your mother's birth date times by your grandmother's years on Earth, it comes out to we're all going to drown in X number of years. Oh my God, we're in trouble. There was an Australian of the Year not that long ago that said we were going to suffer droughts and we were going to run out of water and we were going to be in more trouble than Ned Kelly at Glenrowan in Australia. And that was how we built the desalination unit. And I think they've spent more money on testing it than they have on running it. And the company that built it has been paid more money in penalty rates because we don't use it than what they've been paid to actually use it. And we've been in the middle of floods left, right, and centre. Now, I'm not necessarily blaming him, but what I'm saying is if Joe Blow, public citizen, and I consider myself part of that, and I think I'm a fairly well researching sort of person, I could put up two excellent witnesses that are diametrically opposed. So then what are you left with? Scratch your head and flip a coin. And I think, Simon, a lot of the issues that the genuine people in sustainability suffer from is the broader population doesn't have something to hang a hat on. You get 10 people in this room, whatever room it is, and you get a match and you put it under their hand and it burns them, they believe you. That's it. It's easy. But all of this other stuff, we get into 7.326 degrees and this has happened here and that's happened there. And then we got global warming. Okay, global warming. My God, global warming. Oh, hang on, we just had a town in Eugowra in New South Wales 2 years ago. An entire town was flooded. So now, how do I put those two things together? So I think, Sarab, the biggest problem that we have as a society worldwide is, it seems to me as though all the experts argue with all the experts, and we, the great mass, go, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that, Simon?
Yeah, great point. I feel like there is a certain number of experts that are arguing for one thing and then a certain number in another camp. So that should be taken into account. But it and a lot of the academic process is to push and prod and counter what one has argued and the other. So a lot of the research comes from academia, and they're constantly pushing and pulling against each other. And one, like you said, one lecturer has this concept and pushes for that. So it's always going to happen. It's a little bit like politics. However, I guess over time we just look at the volume of scientists on one side versus the volume on the other. And it seems pretty clear that most scientists are in the, humans are inducing some sort of global warming. How and to what extent that is, we're not really that sure. But it's definitely becoming mainstream now. There are certainly many exist that don't believe that, but many do. And actually, I might segue this into the carbon accounting piece, because just sort of as evidence that it is coming into the mainstream is the governments are starting to adopt policies around carbon emissions and put restrictions on for businesses. So what's happened in the last few years in that space is the International Financial Authority, which is called the IFRS, that have been dictating how people write and do taxes across the world for the last 20 years. That organization has had enough of sustainability standards across the globe, doing parts of this and parts of that in terms of certification or in terms of reporting. And the financial reporting and the sustainability reporting has come to a head now with what's called the IFRS. And they've released their first sustainability disclosure standard. And that's got real momentum globally, with a lot of different countries adopting or looking to adopt what's written in this sustainability standard. And there's different things around assessing risk, assessing how you're disclosing about these things. But the key thing the key change in that standard is that companies will have to start reporting their carbon emissions. And that's a big change. There's a lot of work that's going to have to go in how much petrol you used as your company and how much electricity you use, and not only how much electricity you use, but was it green electricity, was it solar, or did it come from the coal-fired power plants that we have here? But even acknowledging how much work it's going to be, the government is looking at it, and the government's got a bill in at the moment, which is expected to be passed later this year. And once it's passed, businesses across Australia on a tiered basis will have to start reporting their carbon emissions. Of course, the largest companies first, and a year later it'll be the next category, and a year later the next category. But that sort of sets us off on a trend of, within some time the next probably 5 years, probably potentially 5 years from now, arguably most companies in Australia will have to do some form of carbon emissions reporting. So that's step one. Will they have to reduce their carbon emissions? How much are they allowed to emit? Will there be some restrictions on it? Who knows? That's in the future. But just right now, the government's saying, okay, we do want to get a handle on how much gas, greenhouse gas is going into the atmosphere. And whether the government wants to or not, it's being driven globally. So Europe has adopted this already. So the companies in Europe are starting to have to report their greenhouse gas emissions. And if you want to do business with Europe, you have to report yours as well. So yeah, Australia will just be forced to act and forced to move. So that's definitely the big trend in the last sort of year and a half. And yeah, keep an eye out for carbon accounting.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, Simon.
I believe carbon accounting is going to go all the way down to one-man band company.
Could do.
No, I'm serious, Sarab. The intention is I have an office here at home, and eventually I will have to report my carbon usage as a person that doesn't employ anybody, just has myself. But each piece of equipment I've got, I need to account for it. My question on that is, how much carbon am I going to burn?
Yeah.
Putting together the damn report and printing the whole thing off will kill a tree to get half this information out sometimes.
Well, you'll definitely burn more carbon, more money than you will carbon. It's going to be expensive, big time. It's going to be a huge cost to all this reporting.
But at the same time, Simon, that we're not using coal-powered stations in Australia because that's evil, but we're still selling coal to China. And where's some of the largest emission problems coming from? China. And I'm not picking on the Chinese. I'm just saying that this is where the community gets confused. Well, hang on, we can't use coal-powered stations here to have electricity, but people are telling us we're going to have blackouts. But we do sell the coal to another country, and they use the coal. So the greenhouse effect that's in Australia, that's bad, but the greenhouse effect that's in China is not bad. I'm confused. I thought too much. I checked out.
Yeah, that's where you're going to get into the technical component of carbon accounting and what your company's responsible for. So the mining company that mines the coal may emit 2,000 tons or 5,000 tons to get the coal and put their lights on and all of that stuff. But then you've got the downstream impact, and as part of best practice greenhouse gas protocol, it says you have to account for upstream and downstream. So you can't just be hiding away as a subsidiary or offshoot of a company, but then shooting off all this coal, which is of course creating kilotons of carbon dioxide. So yeah, the details are there to try and hold companies accountable. And it's going to be an interesting space to watch over the next 6 months. People like myself have been waiting for the government for over a year they've been debating this bill. It's been getting one step closer, and they keep saying it's going to get released. So they're saying again in this next 6 months it's going to get released. So we're really just waiting for that, because I think back to your point before, like once you've got the fire under your hand, then you've got to move. But right now there's no bill, there's no legislation. Just keep it, it's a nice to have, not a need to have right now.
People only started wearing seatbelts properly when they said, if you don't wear a seatbelt, you're going to get a fine. People only started stop drink and driving when it wasn't about people getting killed. That didn't bother them. It was about, I could lose my license. I mean, the human race is, I remember when drink driving laws came into place, and they had what were known those days in Australia, Sarab, booze buses, because they were old buses converted to do the testing. And there was a bloke in a group of friends. He certainly wasn't a friend of mine, but he was within that group that I was with. It'll take more than a couple of old bloody buses to stop me drinking and driving. You're talking about killing people, you moron. So So again, this sustainability, well, what is it? And do I have to do it now? No. Good. Is it confusing? Yep, good, I'll walk away. Because the average person doesn't understand enough about it. And I don't think governments have done a good enough job of setting up the structure and actually saying, this is this, this is this, this is that. Right here and now, we have a situation in this country where for the last, I'll say 10 years, we have been telling people, put solar panels on your roof and help the environment. Put solar panels on the roof, help the environment, invest money in it, and you'll get this money back. And as late as 2 weeks ago, I was talking to somebody in the solar panel industry where the electricity bodies now are saying, we can't handle the power that's coming back into the grid. So now we're going to put a tariff on all the people that have got solar panels on their roof. So suddenly everybody says, well, why am I bothering to do it? To me, it's still fun. And I'm not blaming Labor. I'm not blaming Liberal. Traditionally, I'm a Liberal voter. But, I mean, the Liberal Party in federal government took 10 years to work out whether they were left, right or down the middle on this. I'm still not sure if they do know anyway. So, and that's coming from a Liberal voter. So poor old Johnny on the street, Simon's trying to tell me that I've got to do this and this, but what's coming into my head from everywhere else is conflicting stories. So how does Simon play his part?
Absolutely. And I feel that there are definitely three major stakeholders here, as you talked about, George. One is the government, one is the industry, where people are working on different ideas, and one is the university, where different kind of research is going on. So I think all the three entities need to work together to ensure that whatever sustainability measures are being taken place are being communicated to each other. Universities are communicating to industry is communicating on time to the government, and that's how they are taking the steps. What do you think on that, Simon? Do you think that the three entities should be in alignment with each other when any kind of measures are out?
Yeah, absolutely. More communication, particularly with the universities and industry. If they can make a better collaboration, it'll just create solutions basically, and it'll keep businesses thinking progressively and not getting stuck. I think that's the key. I feel the government is a little too slow on most things, and particularly with this. So I think the driver for a lot of change in sustainability is going to come from bottom up, which is, I think, what we're seeing now. And I guess the issue with that is people have their best guess at what's good. Like you said, with solar panels, the marketing campaign's on point. It does enough to convince the consumer that it's good. Another key thing about that is that the winners really work out two ways. They're financially better for the consumer and sustainably better. So it's those products where you can have that's the magic recipe. But then you've got your marketing as well. So you're trying to convince people of things, but people want to do the right thing, so they try. And this is where the bottom up drive is coming from. We're trying to do the right thing sustainably. But back to your point, if they haven't properly researched or engaged with universities or have the right information, then bottom up's good because you get momentum, but is it going in the right direction? Well, it's too late because everyone's buying solar panels. So there's a few different pieces there, but communication for sure. I think that Australia could do a lot more with academic and industry partnerships. They do it overseas a lot more, at least in Europe. And I mean, of course they do to some extent, but it's not commonplace, I would say.
So one of the final questions from my side, Simon, because I'm very mindful of your time today, is related to the fact that there are a lot of new jobs which are coming up in the sustainability space. We have got sustainability analysts such as yourself. Then there are sustainability advisors, sustainability consultants, and different kind of things and different kind of roles that are coming up with slightly different job descriptions. So if somebody is listening to you and we are sharing it on LinkedIn, what would you recommend to people who want to join sustainability space? What sort of skills do they need to have, or what sort of degrees do they need to have to really create an impact in the sustainability space in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, good question. There's a few different ways to go about that. There's a few different, say, types of sustainability analysts. So if we look, which is happening a lot of companies are starting to employ a newly created role. For example, a manufacturing company is starting to have someone called the ESG or sustainability expert in their company. And these are all newly created roles. So the key, I think, with getting a job, getting those type of jobs, is actually having previously had industry experience in whatever field that may be. So if it's a mining company, if it's a plastics manufacturing company, it's going to help you to get that job if you know about the industry already. And then sustainability is actually less, I guess, the skills component of it is less material as to understanding the industry. So you see a lot of people who are in a certain role, and then an ESG role comes up. They may do a little bit of training, a couple-week course. They may just have a side interest, but they don't necessarily need to do what I did and go over to Sweden and study for 2 years to do a master's. And they can just shift internally to a sustainability or ESG role. So that's a very common thing that's popping up. And it's kind of hard to go and target those roles if you don't have that experience in the industry. So a generic sustainability analyst, someone like me, it helps to have an understanding of the environment, of the principles of sustainability, just know a little bit about, waste, energy, the world, global problems, sustainable development goals. You be a bit more of a generalist. One of the key things in sustainability is tracking and managing data. So as equally as important as all that, if not more important, is having good data management skills. So business analysts or people that have, I guess, looked at data analytics courses or best practices in managing databases and reporting and Power BI and all those kinds of things. They're all good skills to have as sustainability. And then lastly, passion. I think that really helps. At least it helped in my case. You may have no experience at all, but like George, you've just been recycling because it's the right thing to do. And you go into the interview and you just say, look, I am passionate about doing this. I want it done well. And passion always gets you across the line in wherever you're going. So just back the skills you've got and keep working on it.
Yeah, I think that's for any kind of job, isn't it? Passion goes a long way. If you're not passionate to do what you're doing, you kind of get bored of it, and you'll not be willing to do that for more than 4 or 5 years because you're not passionate about it. You're just there to earn money, or because it's just a fancy term, sustainability analyst, something new. It's similar to like we talk about AI and machine learning, right? A lot of people who enter into AI and machine learning, whenever you talk to them and you go into the technicalities, they will not even understand that. And maybe they've just joined the line because it's a very cool term for them to hear. It's a very fancy term for them. Everybody else is joining. And that's why they want to join. But are you really passionate to do that? I don't really know, but I think it gives me good money. So that's the story of people these days. Because we kind of look into the fact that what kind of role is kind of going to come up and give us more money rather than what we are passionate about. Whereas we should think about what are our passions and then kind of define the other things. Isn't it, George?
Yeah, you've got to. Everybody comes to the table, but not everybody comes to the table with the same reason. Some are there to take, and some are there to give, and some are there to sell to you, and some are there to buy. So in any sort of thing, everybody comes to the table eventually, but it's what's the motivation of them coming to the table. One of the things that I teach in my sales training courses is that you've got to hear what people are saying, but you've got to listen to where it's coming from. Now, we had an ex-prime minister of this country, Malcolm Turnbull, and his wife, bagging the current Liberal Party's idea of using nuclear power to generate electricity. Now, I don't know what the finer detail is, but the first thing that strikes me is Malcolm Turnbull hasn't been happy with the Liberal government ever since the Liberals turfed him out. That's number one. So I'm not expecting him to say anything kind about anything that the Liberal Party's doing. Number two, Malcolm Turnbull and his wife own a solar powered or a sustainable power energy company. So they're a green power, whatever they call themselves. So if the nuclear energy took off, his company would suffer. So therefore, he has to have some sort of a conflict of interest in any comment that comes out of his mouth. The manufacturers of petrol in this country have a very different view of what sustainability should look like as opposed to the electric car industry. Because if we go out and tell everybody to buy an electric car, they ain't buying petrol. So you have to take a little, who's at the table, what are they telling us, and where's that coming from? What's their motivation? So when your best friend gives you the highest of compliments, that's interesting. When your worst enemy gives you a pretty good compliment, that's more powerful to me because he's your worst enemy and he's complimenting you. So in anything that we're looking at, anybody that's listening to this podcast and then trying to work out, well, where do I sit? First off, listen to what people are saying to you and then understand where they're actually coming from. What's the motivation? Okay. So I do an analysis of patentable product. I get paid X amount of dollars to do an analysis. If I say, yes, it's successful, I get paid X dollars. If I say, no, it's not successful, I still get paid X dollars. So I'm not biased to a yes or a no. Now, you, on the other hand, Sarab, are in exactly the same position as me, and you get paid $5,000 for a no and $10,000 for a yes. Automatically, I would believe that this bloke who gets no difference going to be far more logical in his answer than that guy it's swayed. Go to Westpac and see if they'll ever tell you that NAB's got a better home loan. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So in all of this sustainability, you need to, all of us, every single one of us needs to understand it as best we can. Not so that we can be equal to Simon or those that he listens to, but so that we've got some chance of actually hearing something and then being able to decipher the chaff from the wheat or fiction from fact. And then we've got some hope. But also the Simons and everybody else that are promoting it have to come up with a way of telling the general public, this is why you should be doing it. And it's not just about saving this earth in the next 60 years is not that much of a motivation for somebody that's 65 years of age and their electricity is going up 40% in a year. Because they ain't going to be here. What they've got to do is get food on the table. And the way they get food on the table is not pay so much for their energy. but we have to talk to them in a different language.
Yeah, and these kind of discussions can just continue as a town hall discussion, or like the event that we did last year, George, where we actually had an in-person event, Simon, and we discussed about building a better Australia. So we had talked about different angles of building a better Australia, from an environment point of view, from university point of view, from industry point of view, and from immigration point of view. So surely, if we are, we might be having it this year as well. And if you're keen, we might want to have you as a speaker. Not something which I've discussed with George. He's going to kill me if I lock you in as a speaker. But I think today's episode has been another addition to that great series of episodes that we have already done on environment and sustainability. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. And hope we can have more discussions and just keep on continuing it on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This is an Ultimate Global Podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.